2, 1. Welcome in again, everybody, to the Terry Bowden Show on the Auburn Undercover Podcast. I'm your host, Ronnie Sanders, and we're joined today by a special guest and my longtime friend, one of my longtime friends, Tommy Bowden.
Good. Hey, the real stuff starts tonight.
That's right. Hey, hey, Tommy, I was trying to think of, I haven't talked to you about it, but do you see Indiana as being the favorite? Have you watched them enough to think that of course, they're ranked number one. They got the number one seed. If you'd see that team as being the best football team, if you had to pick one, there's so many good, there's about 4 or 5 pretty good ones.
I have watched them probably as much as Saban and Urban Meyer, and I have the same impression. The best coached team in college football. Not only that, maybe the best job, 2-year job in the history of college football. Your 20 straight wins comes close.
Yeah,
but, this would be a little bit ahead of that.
It's amazing too, and a lot of people don't realize Kurt Cignetti's father, Frank Cignetti, was our coach. He was my dad's offensive coordinator at Florida State when Tommy played, and I rode the bench. And but I always thought of Frank Cignetti as being I want to say brilliant, but a super smart offensive coach. You can see where Kurt got his background.
Yeah, that and attention to detail. That's one thing I can remember about his dad. And then his dad was obviously a good evaluator of staff. Like
right.
Kurt's got staff that's been with him that are great coaches. And I remember I was getting ready to leave West Virginia. I was a GA for 1 year. He said, Frank says, you might want to stay. I'm bringing in this young 26-year-old coach from Syracuse, Nick Saban. And I said, no, I'm going to go. But, it looks like Kurt's got the same ability as his dad to really, I think Joe Pender was on that staff with Frank Cincinnati. Kurt's got a great ability to evaluate staff and talent.
That's what I've noticed as I've talked about Indiana as opposed to others. The attention to detail, they don't seem to miss anything. He picks up athletes that other people seem to miss in recognizing and evaluating talent. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in recruiting. But I don't know if his dad was quite as cocky as he is.
Like I was going to say, I don't know if Frank had Kurt's personality. What personality, you might ask?
But to give people an idea, this was back in the 70s. My dad was the head coach, and Frank Cignetti was the offensive coordinator. And then when my dad left, Tom, you graduated about that time, and I stayed and played for Frank. Did you play for Frank as a head coach any?
One year, and then I was a GA for 1 or 2 years. But I played for him for 1 year, my 5th year, and then coached for him for at least 1 year.
We nicknamed him, and I was a GA 1 semester. I graduated in December, and that was a GA 1 semester when Nick Saban was there. But I nicknamed him, or we did, Frank Clicknetti, because nobody could rewind. Back then we had 16 millimeter film. He would go back and forth over and over. We thought that was a good nickname for his dad.
Attention to detail, and that's where he got that nickname. He'd run it back over and over and over and find every advantage that he could.
Some other things I was thinking about, because you've been a head coach. You've been a head football coach since about 5 or 6 decades, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, from Alabama to Auburn to Kentucky to Auburn to Tulane to Clemson, and all these places. But Alabama seems to be a little different. I saw where Kalen DeBoer's name was mentioned at Michigan, which I don't think he probably wants to go. But that's a job that it seems like the pressure of that job runs people off as much as getting fired. When you think of Perkins, you think of Curry, you think of Stallings, you think who was the coach who went to Texas A&M?
Frank.
The pressure almost gets to be when people say he would never leave. I said, you know what? I don't know what his family's going through, but you coach there. It may be a little different than anywhere else.
Yeah, I think it is because you're a head coach at Auburn. Auburn's got pressure. Florida's got pressure. Texas got pressure. In my opinion, Notre Dame and Alabama will be 2 of the most pressure. Obviously, Notre Dame for the religious reasons and the international audience. But Alabama, to me, was a cut above in pressure after being there for 3 years, and it's hard to describe how it's different, but it is.
Yeah.
Let me ask
Well,
you
yeah,
a
I guess.
question.
What's that, Ronnie?
Well, DeBoer has been there 2 years.
DeBose
You're
was
on
there
Curry.
about DeBose was there about 2.
That's,
Longer than Mike Price.
My,
Longer than Mike Price.
yeah.
no doubt about that.
For
But
the
I
same
guess
reasons.
you were on, yeah, you were on Curry's staff, right?
Yes, sir.
So how does DeBoer's situation? He's won 10 games, and if they lose tonight, they're going to be ready to run him out of town. And
Yeah.
what's the how do you manage that? I mean, Bill Curry, if I remember, won 10 games his last year, got tied for the conference championship, and ended up with a brick through his window and left for Kentucky.
Yeah, like you said, I remember after 10 wins, getting ready for the bowl game, there was an article in the Birmingham News, and I read it, and it had the top 5 candidates for his job, and one of them was, of course, one of them was Dad, our father, to take Coach Curry's place, and they were sitting at number 3 in the nation at 10-1, 10 straight victories. And they lost Auburn, which you don't do at the end. And of course, lost the bowl game to Miami close, and then he was gone the next day to Kentucky. And like you said, when you got 10 wins, you're number 3 in the nation, and you pick up the paper and the top 5 candidates for your job is listed in the paper. It is a unique situation.
Well, and I think realistically, you got Bear Bryant, who won 6 national championships there, and Nick Saban, who won 6 national championships there. Nobody else is even close.
Yeah.
So everybody in between was held to a standard that probably wasn't. You're not going to hit that every now and then. Nick he's a different kind of coach to be and Nick is as thorough as Curt Cignetti. He's kind of the same guy, because Curt Cignetti was with Nick at Alabama, because I talked to him several times when he said, "I'm just tired of this assistant coaching stuff. I want to be a head coach," and went back to IUP like his dad was.
And he took the same personality as Nick and the coaching.
Yes.
We didn't know Nick had a personality until Pat McAfee joined the ESPN show. And
I've never seen Nick laugh so much, and he really has relaxed in his post coaching career.
Oh,
but
man,
it's amazing.
But one day for bringing him lunch when I was at LSU, I brought his Sam Nader, who was the ops guy. I said, "Hey, I'll go get Coach Saban," and Sam would give me money because I was a GA, and I'd go buy him lunch and me lunch and Coach Saban lunch. And he said, "Get him a salad." He told me what to get him, and I bring it in there and hand it to him, and he cussed me up one side and down another. He's like, "I only eat one meal a day." He had some other choice words. Of course, later in the day, he said he didn't apologize, but he said, "Hey, about earlier," he said, I only eat one meal." I'm like, "Coach, we're good."
Yeah, we were talking earlier today, Tommy, about recruiting, because I was looking over the staff that Golish has brought together at Auburn, and it seemed like every question was, how many of them are great recruiters? And now, that was always critical. Dad would say, well, like, not all my coaches are great recruiters. If I had, back then you had 8. If I had 4 or 5 good recruiters or 4 good coaches, on the field coaches, it would be a good balance. And then it got to be where everybody had to be a good recruiter, but that was about relationship. And, our dad and you and I probably, and you had Dabo with you. It was about going into the home and talking to mother and eating her food and the relationship you had. And now I think it boils down to money right now. And I'm not even sure which coach makes the decision. Is it the GM or is it the coach?
You can go get average coaches, because I remember working for you. One of the statements you had is, "Hey, you can be an average coach, but you better be a great recruiter if you're an average coach, because great players can make coaches, look really good. But now you better have great players, and people are buying them." When I was at Alabama, we mentioned Alabama when I coached here in the late '80s. SMU got in trouble for paying players. The governor of Texas was involved in it, and they got the death penalty. And now you got the governor of Louisiana telling Lane Kiffin, "Hey, we'll give you as much money as you need." And Scott Strickland, Florida, the AD, trying to trump them. But like you said, there's no skill. Dabo was great in the home. Our father was great with them mothers in the home. But now that quality and that trait is non-existent, because it's the size of your wallet, and it's changed it. It's really changed it.
And it really has.
With Alabama, though?
What's that?
Was that not always the case with Alabama, though? I'm joking.
Well, we'll say this. LSU started the NIL package back here in the 80s with Dickerson and James. But, That's kind of unspoken, Ronnie. That there were teams in the NIL back in those days.
It stood for something else, I guess, on that on that in that regard. Uh, but again, it does boil down to, I've noticed that even Dabo Sweeney at Clemson, he was reluctant to change that philosophy of, developing kids, bring them out of high school, buy into our culture, win them a great home recruiter. I remember when you beat my dad on C.J. Spiller. Y'all may not know this, but I was at broadcasting, and Tommy was at Clemson, and my dad at Florida State. And one of the best players in the country was C.J. Spiller, right? Was running back from down there.
Right.
And Dad would get on the phone with me and say, "I think I got him. I think I got him." And I'd get on the phone with you. Hey Terry, I don't think he's got him. I think we got him.
No, it's just, but you're right, and one of the reasons we got him obviously was the relationship, the personal relationship that Dabo had with CJ, not with his mother. Urban Meyer had his mother 40 miles away in Gainesville, but Dabo had the kid, and he did a great job of developing trust, and he would have a plan for him. And now that Nick Saban was out of his comfort zone, when it got this NIL and transfer portal, and Dabo is out of his comfort zone. His comfort zone is what you said: developing relationship with players and going there and selling yourself and your loyalty. You'll treat her son. He'll treat her son just like his son, and that's not a factor anymore.
Well, and I was thinking, I saw several articles I've seen on Auburn Undercover this week about how many of our players are going to jump in the portal, or should we be worried, or do they not like Auburn? Do they not like the coaches? I think it's got nothing to do with that. It's got who's going. You can't make. It's like coaches. It's like Lane Kiffin. You can't make more money unless you make yourself marketable. You got to go out there and open up yourself to the market. And these players, that's what they're doing right now. I don't know that I like the way the game's going, but it's the way it's going, whether you like it or not. The product on the field is just as good, if not better, but the background to it is not as good, probably.
Yeah, and the ripple effects of the NIL and transfer portal. I'm just going to tie it to the NIL since we're talking about money.
Right.
10 teams opting out of bowl games. I wonder if it's because, and it might be, that those guys get paid. They're getting paid whether they play or not. Why risk another 2 more weeks or 3 more weeks of practice and an injury and of sweating and fatigue if you're going to get paid regardless? So I'm not sure now if that NIL is tied into those 10 teams. At the players, I'm sure the players want to vote on it. And who are your leaders? Well, your leaders are the best players. Your best players are the ones getting paid. So I'm not sure if that's not tied in indirectly to how these teams are opting out because of maybe money already being paid.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Ronnie.
I was going to say, does the calendar right now to me seems really screwed up?
It's screwed up. That's what I was going to get to say. Yeah, what's that?
Yeah. In NFL, they have you can't talk to a player or a coach before or till after, I think, the Super Bowl. And if the NCAA would have the same thing, say you can't talk to a player, you can't talk to a coach, and move the transfer portal till January the 2nd and January the 3rd, go ahead and start the season August the 23rd. Hey, have it's regular season, and then have your 12-team playoff, finish it January 1st of January, and then let your tampering begin with players and coaches, but it can't start till after January the 1st. There's a way to get it solved. Unfortunately, we just don't have any spine or backbone by the administration or the leadership in NCAA, or we would do something like that.
Yeah, I think, and we've kind of got a perfect storm where everything kind of came together at the same time. When portal transfer came about the same time as NIL, which now doesn't go real well with conference championship games where you play the very best teams at the end of your schedule that could possibly knock you out, which Alabama was afraid was going to happen to them, and all those things. And then coaches leaving halfway through the season, getting offered jobs or getting fired halfway through the seasons. It just seems like it's kind of out of whack right now, and don't know exactly where it's going. But I don't know how you put the worms back in the can or put the sardines back in the can.
It would take a strong leader. It would take a Commissioner Saban or Urban Meyer or somebody really puts some structure to it that's got some credibility, and then really work with NCAA to get it done. But it doesn't look like they're going in that direction.
Who is your favorite for the playoff?
Well, you mean to win it all or just
win it all?
Well, we've talked about Indiana, and I see them as the favorite. I know a lot of people like Texas Tech, and if the matchup gets to Texas Tech and Indiana, a lot of people are picking Texas Tech. But it wouldn't surprise me, Ronnie, to see Ohio State and Indiana play again, and then Ohio State do exactly what they did last year: lose the last game to Michigan, and then come back and win the national championship. They lost to Indiana. They have a chip on their shoulders. They've got the players. They've got the talent. They've got the coaching. They've been there. Now they have the incentive. So it wouldn't surprise me if Ohio State wins it all.
And if you look at the odds, Ohio State right now at a plus 200 and Indiana plus 310. So really the odds are a little bit in favor of Ohio State doing exactly that. But I really think about 5 teams have the ability, if they get hot. Georgia, Oregon, and Texas Tech have the ability. They're not the best, but I think those have the ability. I think a little more of a loaded team or something about them. And you have to really, us from the South, we have to kind of watch Oregon. We don't pay much attention to the West Coast. But I'm gonna tell you something; they're pretty dang good. They got good players.
They're coached from a guy whose background is kind of the Southeastern Conference.
Right.
But he's a great recruiter. And the thing you talked about earlier, they have with Phil Knight, they have NIL money. It's the combination of great coaches and great players. And like in Oregon, they're one of those teams that we don't see much. We're usually asleep a lot of times when they play out on the Pacific Coast. But theirs could be as good as anybody.
I live in Louisiana right now, and you live in Florida, and it's hard to get a credible answer, but those are 2 good jobs, Florida and LSU. If you had to say which one was better, is there one you would think would be the better job? Because in Louisiana, everybody says it's LSU, and in Florida, and Ronnie, you've been there too, both schools too. You know about it a little bit more than I do.
I've recruited like both states very actively, and being in Louisiana for 2 years. Terry, it is hard. Now that you've lived it, it's hard to beat a situation where, number one, there's great players, and you're the only state school. The superintendent is LSU graduate. The principal is LSU graduate. The English teacher that's got to give them a C for him to get eligible is a LSU graduate. And you don't split them with anybody. And it's hard to come in there from out of state, either Texas from one side or Alabama, Auburn from the other side, or Arkansas from the north. Nobody from Cuba from the south. So they've got a pretty good lock on that state. Florida's a great place, and there's a lot more athletes, but you got to split them 3 ways. If Miami puts a lock on Dayton Broward like Howard Schnellenberger and Jimmy Johnson and Dennis Erickson did, I like the LSU job just as good.
Yeah.
Where'd you live?
It's funny. It's funny. And you wonder how much NIL is going to change that, because it opens up the whole country to your team. But I'm not sure who said this, but the coach at Joey McGuire at Texas Tech, his 2 linebackers have both started over 40 games. Quarterback started 35 games. He said you got to have a base of kids that sign out of high school and then fill in with the NIL, because if you go one way all the way, I think you go into the FSU situation where you have something bad happens and everybody lays down on you, because nobody's from there.
That's one of the things that we're not familiar with, since we're coaching an era where you didn't have that type of situation. But the unity, the leadership, the cohesiveness of the team, you have the chance to lose it with the transfer portal. But if you got the nucleus, which you're talking about, get some high school kids, develop them, let them be the kind of foundation and backbone, and then sprinkle in your transfer portal guys. And nobody's done it better, as we mentioned, than Kurt Cignetti.
Both of you have coached at Auburn. Talk about a different era. Did either of you think that Auburn would ever hire a coach that was born in Russia, raised in New York, and graduated from Ohio State? I didn't.
I don't think anybody did.
I didn't think that.
The only thing worse than that would be hiring one from the Midwest.
And hey, Alabama's tried that several times, and it didn't work too well to get outside of that fact there as well. But I saw somebody else on Facebook. I saw Charles Barkley making comments about Auburn and Bo Jackson. I mean, their love for Auburn, it's like Auburn made a difference in their life. And I just wonder, with kids going to 3 or 4 different schools, how a school's ever going to make a difference in their life? How are they going to meet their wife or know the alma mater or their favorite color, or that's where they're going to go back and be with all their Letterman buddies, 30 years from now. There's so much that you're going to miss as this thing goes on and goes on. And it seems like now, and it's not just a couple of guys like free agency. It's half your team goes in the portal just to see what kind of money they can make.
Terry, that's like your daddy and mother have burial plots in Birmingham. That's where their base is, all their family is. And me and you, we didn't have a home. I'm going to be cremated. I ain't got a home.
I don't either.
But Barkley and Bowden, they had a home right there, and they were there all the time. And daddy and mother would go back to Birmingham, and they got plots and all their family, and we don't have that. And that's kind of like the trend. Those kids don't have a home. Like you said, I don't know where they'll go to their reunions at.
Yeah, do you think Lane Kiffin should have coached at Ole Miss? Should they have let him coach there?
Terry, I see so many comments about a coach that I can't believe he's turning his back on his players. When I left Tulane, the AD didn't want me to coach in the bowl game.
I knew that.
And so it's not the head coach's decision. It's the AD's decision. So I see people say, well, Lane Kiffin turned his back, and I can't believe he's not coaching. Well, the AD didn't want him at Ole Miss. They didn't want him. They wouldn't let him. So I think he wanted to. He could have kept the whole staff there and some continuity and maybe made a great run and maybe won it all. But there'll be some dysfunction there now because of the staff. It's not as solid as it was. But yeah, I think it's really out of the coach's hands. It's in the AD's hand.
Hey, I tell you, you have to live in Louisiana. You have to live in Louisiana to know how much of a rivalry and a hatred there is between LSU and Ole Miss too.
Oh, yeah.
It is like LSU and Alabama or LSU and Ole Miss is a pretty hated rivalry.
Yeah, just got worse too.
Yeah.
Is there something to be said for okay, LSU's a better job, Florida's a better job than Ole Miss, but it may be a better job, but the timing just isn't right. I mean, I get not walking out on your team, but at the same time, and we had the same situation at Florida, but we got fired mid-season, and Ron ended up, he kept, but they were going to let us coach the bowl game. We coached the rest of the year, but Jeremy, Zook ended up going to Illinois, but they still wouldn't let. Jeremy was like, okay, I got to know, and he wouldn't let us finish the bowl game. But now, I guess my question was, is there, from Kiffin's standpoint, should he have turned down the job?
No. I don't think. I think you see like Summerall do what Summerall did. He's employed by Florida. They're letting him coach, and they want him to coach, and he wanted to coach. But I think he's already signed the contract with Florida. So Kiffin could have signed the contract with LSU, and then Ole Miss, if they wouldn't have got their feelings hurt or whatever, could have let him coach. So. Timing, I mean, that's just, I think, a business decision by the administration.
Fair enough. Terry?
Fair enough. I appreciate you coming on with us, and good conversation, some good topics, and hopefully I'll get down there to see you here soon.
Great games night, Alabama, Oklahoma. We'll hit that next time.
Who you getting, Alabama? Let's hit it real quick before we get on.
I'm gonna take Alabama in a close one.
I'm going to take Oklahoma in a close one. Unless Alabama can run better than they did against Georgia, I'm going to have a hard time with it. But it should be a great game. It's just a 1.5 point spot, and should be a good game.
Two brothers disagreeing. Doesn't surprise me. I'll see y'all. Enjoy the game.
See you later.
Good to be. Thanks for being with
us. We talked about everything but the Alabama Oklahoma game, but I thought we could get into all those games and the spread and what everybody thinks about these games, because I've sure talked about them a lot. I'm doing a lot different podcasts than Tommy is. I'm doing a lot of podcasts where everybody listens. They got their phones on and they're wagering on games on their phones while they're listening to a podcast. And I'm a football coach. I never gambled in my life. We're not allowed to, And so, but you start understanding how difficult it is to pick a winner when you start putting a 14 points line, a spread on a game, and how difficult it is. But you know what? As I look at the games that we're facing this weekend, last year, the 4 home games all won. Mm-hmm. And I don't think sometimes people realize how much of an advantage a home field is, especially a place like the Palace on the Prairie at Oklahoma, especially Kyle Field. Mm-hmm. That's Kyle Stadium and Outson Stadium. Those are hard places. That's why, to me, you got 2 Power 4 games and you got 2 G5 games. And so and I think the Power of Four games are so close. I'm going to give the advantage to the home field. Because and I think Oklahoma right now, their defense, Alabama has not been able to run the football
at all.
And when you're one dimensional against Oklahoma, you're in trouble because they lead the nation in sacks with 41. And I think they lead the nation. They're not lead the nation. They are 29% percentage on third downs. And if you can't run the ball, you're going to be in a lot of third down longs. And Brent Venables is going to come after you over and over again. I think they've got the better quarterback at Alabama than they do at Oklahoma. I don't think Mateer is quite as good as we thought he was at the beginning of the season, unless his hand did not heal. They got their offensive problems at Oklahoma too. But boy, their defense is so good right now. And Alabama, if they don't run the ball, I don't see how they can. It's a 1.5 point spread, and it's a home game at Oklahoma. And I think. I just have to give the home field advantage just that little bit extra. It only takes one field goal. It only takes one series, to pick them. So, what's your thoughts on the Alabama on that game?
I'm picking Oklahoma, but a lot of people don't realize, Kevin Wilson, former head coach of Tulsa, former head coach of Indiana, he's there as kind of the senior offensive assistant. And to me, Ben Arbuckle, they're better on offense, but Kevin has kind of brought. If you look at what they're doing, Kevin's brought a little bit of maturity and a little bit of accountability. And if you look at him, one of the coaches out there told me, he said, we're about like Auburn. I said, yeah, but the difference is you guys figured out a way to win 10 games, and Auburn figured out a way to lose 7. And that's a difference in coaching.
Well, you're exactly right. You lose a close game early, you lose 2 close games early, then you don't have the confidence, and all of a sudden in the second half, you're looking for things that are going to go bad. And I think in Oklahoma, they struggled, but then they got their act together and won 4 straight. They finished the season winning 4 straight, and they got that confidence. And you're talking about an Alabama win 23-21. That's all it was. It wasn't like they killed them, And Alabama, I want to say, outstatted them that game, except Oklahoma didn't turn the ball over, And so it's going to be a tight ball game because I think very few teams out there don't have some kind of deficiency, and so you have to look and see what that one is. But I think Alabama, I just think when you got that, when it's this close and these teams are this good, and you're playing at one team's home, it is a difference. It is. If you face it when you're at Auburn, you know what you can see it. You know what the difference is. Now, you talk about Kyle Field, 110,000 people. And you got a 3.5 point spot on the game with Miami. And Miami's a good football team too. They're about as good defensively, except Texas A&M is tied with Oklahoma for 41 sacks on the year. And they've got a quarterback at Miami that's really not that mobile. He can't. They run the ball better, but they're not that mobile. And I'm gonna tell you something. This, and I know this. If you're in a loud stadium, you know who it affects? The offensive line on the visiting team. You'll have 3 or 4 illegal procedures in that game just because the pass rush is so good, and those linemen will be working for 2 straight weeks on set, and they won't be able to hear. And as Nick Saban says, they're piping sound into the stadium along with all that noise. And I just think, and that's a field goal difference. That's a field goal difference right there. Just playing behind the chains 3 or 4 times, and it will happen. I remember when we played Tennessee in the SEC championship, Peyton Manning's this senior year, and it was an indoor. I don't know if is it Mercedes-Benz or was it a different stadium back then? I don't even remember.
Then now it's the Mercedes-Benz.
But we played. It was louder. It was louder than what we were used to. It was indoor, and both teams had 4 or 5 illegal procedures in that game because we weren't quite comfortable with that sound. We couldn't hear, and that's offensive linemen need. They don't work completely by sight. They work a little bit by sound, and you get jumpy. And if you remember, Tennessee had a great defensive line that year, and we were jumpy, but so were they. And but that's the kind of thing I think will happen at Kyle Field with Miami, which is going to hurt them. Now it's going to be so close. That's a 3.5 point spread there. With
on the other foot, what if we talk about the difference in home field advantage? What if that game was played in Miami? I don't think it matters nearly as much.
No. You're exactly right. You know what? Miami's a pro town. They don't even come to when they won national championships. They didn't fill their stadium up. The people don't get excited. They don't. It's not a Southeastern Conference atmosphere. And it was amazing because I remember being a graduate assistant at Florida State and going down to Miami. Then that was back when they had Irvin, Michael Irvin and some of the great players, and they couldn't fill the stadium up. And so I don't think that doesn't affect people going down there unless you play them early and it's hot, humid, and you're not from that part of the country to handle the heat. But as far as crowd noise and atmosphere, they don't have it at Miami. They just don't. They just don't have it.
And now they're playing at Hard Rock Stadium, and it's
Right.
20, 30 mile, whatever it is, north of
Not a campus. No, it's not a campus atmosphere.
Used to play in the Orange Bowl, which was closer to campus. It was a dump, but it was closer than than Hard Rock. And Miami would be much better off having a even if it was smaller, close to campus, packing in and make it a nice experience. I think.
Well, Outson Field, let's go to Oregon. I mean, Outson Field is, I don't think it's 75,000 people. In SEC standards, it's not a very big stadium. No. But it is one of the most electric, loud, and I've been there too. It's one of the most loud, electric. They're right on top of you. It's on campus, and they are wild. And now that they've got really, really good players, and they've had good players for a while, but like Tommy mentioned with Phil Knight and that NIL money, they've got even better players. And their head coach has some Southeastern Conference background to him as well, and understands how to play. So, I mean, I'm thinking, I hate to say this, in the two Power 5 games or the G5 games, it's not talent is what's going to change that game more than even home field advantage. Ole Miss, Oxford, Mississippi, they've got more talent than Tulane. And I think that, and those are large spreads too. I want to say it's 17.5 for the Tulane game and 20.5 today for the James Madison. But I'm going to take the home team on both those games as well, because I think in those games the talent level begins to separate the two teams too much. That they separate the teams from what you have the ability to do. And I think the coaching is a wash. Kippen's not there, but even though John Sumrall, and I really like John. I think he's done a great job. I got to know him when he was at Troy. I think his foot's one foot in the door, one foot out the door, and that's a ton of distractions. Your coaches are wondering, is he going to take you with him? You know how it feels. You know what these kids, are we going with him? Are we not going with him? Players starting to think about stuff. They don't know. And you don't have a job, and your kid's got to go to school somewhere, And so I just think, although I think maybe James Madison might be maybe the better team. I don't know, but I just don't think. I think Oregon to me is that sleeper team.
I agree with you. And back to Ole Miss and Tulane. I talked to one of the Tulane coaches a couple of days ago, and I said, how do you feel about the game? He said, honestly. He said, we had a bunch of injuries. He said, our best offensive lineman was hurt when we played him the first time. He said, we had other injuries. And he said, Sumrall has taken the Florida job. He said, but at least he's here. He said, we just kind of feel like with all the stuff going on at Ole Miss and the head coach not being there, he said, I think we got a great chance to win. We'll see. Yeah. I don't.
Well, and I think that's the atmosphere you want. That's what you want. Will Hall, I know Will. Will's in Alabama. Boy, I coached against him when he was at West Al a few times. And then I don't know, was it at West Georgia after that? I'm not sure where he was after. Was West Al. Good guy. Things didn't work out at Southern Miss, but he does a good job. And I'm sure the same reason they kept the coach, defensive coordinator at Ole Miss, they kept the offensive guy at Tulane, just some continuity there, to make sure they kept it as smooth as possible. But I would say if I'm a coach at Tulane, that's the kind of positive attitude I would try to have, and my players would try to have. It'll have no effect on the outcome of the game, because as soon as you get on the football field, he who has the best players wins, and they've got the first team all conference running back in Lacey. They got the second team all conference quarterback in Trisdale, and so. Chambliss, Trinidad Chambliss. And so I just think the talent level gets to be too much in a game like that. And they kept their defensive coordinator and their offensive coordinator, in the thing. And which begs the question. I mean, I swear I heard Clatt or one of those guys on TV say that one of the best offensive play callers in the country is Lane Kiffin. And I'm thinking, well, who calls the plays, Lane, or does Charlie Weiss call the play? I thought Charlie Weiss was the play. He calls
He
the
is.
plays, doesn't he?
He does.
And
He
I would
does.
say Lane holds up he holds that game plan sheet in front of his face because he wants to be a part of it, and appear to be a part. And again, and I know that I don't think two people can call plays. When people
Not
say
well.
no, not very well. What people don't understand, it's a group effort on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. It's a group effort at halftime. It's a group effort sometimes between series. But calling plays is like playing chess. You can't have two people taking turns with the moves. You got to be thinking 2 or 3 moves ahead. And so Charlie Weiss, I've always felt like he was the play caller. And it doesn't matter to me. What I'm saying is, by him staying there, it's not like they lost the play caller. Now, I will say this: a head coach on the sideline, he can make the final decision. 4th and 1, do we go for it? Coach, do you want to go for it? Because that's a head coaching decision quite a bit. Or it sometimes during a game, because I've been on the headset when my dad was calling plays. He was a great play caller, and I've been on the calling plays at Auburn when my brother was on the headset and Jimbo and Trickett. And I might ask, what do you like? I might say, and if I had enough time, if maybe there's a timeout or maybe there's the ball, somebody got hurt, and I would say, what do you like? And that's about as much input as you want. Other than that, just shut up and don't get in my ear. Shut up and don't get in my ear.
Lord was like that at Florida. He wanted input between series, but once the series started, he wanted everybody to be quiet. I can't imagine being on the headset with Jimbo and Trickett. I remember being in a staff meeting one day and on a staff with Sal Sinceri and Pete Jenkins and Jimbo and Trickett and all. And Nick walks in and tells Jimbo he needs to watch his language after practice one day.
Hey, and that made Trickett feel good, didn't it? That Jimbo was worse.
Right.
No, I just think people who have not done it understand. If you can imagine somebody playing chess, calling plays is very much like that. You've got to be thinking 1 or 2 or 3 moves down the road. You run this play to set up that play. When you run this play and you're thinking what you've worked on all week. And everybody else, I don't care who they are, you just tell them to shut up until I ask for a question. When I ask you to speak, speak. If I don't ask you to speak, don't speak, And then if you're the head coach, you're allowed to I've heard my dad say, Dad, gummit George, run it. Run, throw that bomb now, throw the bomb now, So when you're the head coach, you do have the right to step in. And Lane Kiffin may do that. I don't know that he does, but I think Charlie Weiss, like his dad, is the offensive play caller on that team. So I think, and a very good one, That's why Lane Kiffin's if Lane was calling all the plays, he wouldn't need him in LSU. He's one of the first guys he hired was Charlie Weiss. And so that was a good one. But anyway, it's the coaching. And I wanted to mention this to you. You probably have a better feel for it. Staffing, they're about how far are they in the staffing because you're a little bit more in tune with the staffing situation. I know they picked up an outside linebacker defensive end coach that they thought was a good addition just recently. They kept the defensive coordinator, which is a huge plus. He's got his offensive coordinator, quarterback coach, play caller from South Florida. And so he makes it clear he depends on that guy to run the offense and call the plays. He makes it very clear. And so sounds like he's got a good combination of coaches on the field.
The one thing that jumped out to me, and again, he's hired guys who were former coordinators, former head coaches, which tells me that he doesn't really care who gets the credit. And that's a little bit different. And I'm not going to call out any names, but
sure.
I mean, a lot of times the head coach is worried about, okay, well, I'm not going to get the credit. I want to take over play calling, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. Help your guys get jobs. I mean, let them do their jobs. At the end of the day, you're the head coach, and if they do well, you're getting paid. You're getting an extension. It doesn't matter.
Ronnie, you don't know how many coaches, knowing and working with staffs around the country, you don't know how many head coaches hold on to that game plan sheet, and all they're doing is kind of looking at it and glossing over it. Because they ain't calling no plays, they're not calling any plays. They don't look like they're not involved, and so sometimes it's just make sure it doesn't look like they're just stoically standing on the sidelines. My father called plays most of his life, but in the last 10 years when he was winning championships and he was 70 years old, he wasn't as involved. and I'm not sure they were as good, but Jimbo came back there with him and did a good job calling plays. But quite often, you hit it right on the head. A head coach quite often will try to make people feel like he's doing more than this. But anyway, it's good that I think he's got a good. Seems like he's got a good beginnings to start on his staff to get them going, because you can't hardly. And he's not going to panic on losing players in the portal, because there's nothing you can do about it. It's about money. It's not about they don't like him or they don't like Auburn.
Right. And they're restructuring the way they're kind of doing NIL. But I mean, if you look at the staff, he brought back Cody Burns, who won a national championship as a player. You kept Durkin as a coordinator. You brought your offensive coordinator with you, Larry Porter, who's as good a running back.
He's been at Auburn before, hasn't he?
He has. On the I believe he was coaching there during the national championship season, I believe. Yeah. He brought his offensive line coach with him, who it looks like he's about 22. I'm not sure. I think he's around 30, but he's not very big. And then DeMarcus Van Dyke, kind of a rising star recruiter in Florida. Tim Banks, former, he's a safeties coach, brought him from Tennessee.
That's right.
Former coordinator. Coleman Hutzler, who was a former coordinator at Mississippi State, kept Bontrell King Williams. I mean, he's got a really, really, it's pretty amazing what kind of staff he's put together. It really reminds me a lot of your first staff at Auburn, and then when you changed up, Tommy left, and then there was a change with Wayne Hall, and then you brought in Brother Oliver. And brought in my defensive line coach too when I lost with Kurt Crane. I lost Kurt, and brought in Pete Jenkins, who I was blessed to have some of the best coaches in America working on that staff, and I think if you're going to be successful, you've got to have those kind of guys. But let's get back to this other issue that I was trying to get to with Tommy, because I was just, portal transfer and NILs were just starting when I was at ULM. And I wasn't getting players with money. I was losing players with money because we didn't have any money. And so anytime I recruited a good player out of high school or junior college, I was just grooming him, for somewhere else. And now we had 5,000 or something like that. We had little bits of money, but we couldn't keep anybody there. And I'm wondering, because on the website today, and I forget if it was Philip talking about is this guy a good recruiter or that guy? But who is actually doing? I mean, there's a GM and there's a money budget, and who's deciding? I mean, to me, it's not about the person. It's not about creating relationships. It's about evaluation, because the whole deal is you better evaluate good and put your money on the right guy, because if you have a beautiful relationship with the wrong guy, so it's got to be. I'm just thinking, does the GM and the head coach make these calls that that it used to be a great recruiter would sit in that home or call on the phone? Some coaches cannot stand to be on the phone, and that it just kills them as a recruiter. You got to be one of those guys that loves to be on the phone and talk to those guys. Rodney Garner, one of the great assets he had, he could talk on that phone to those recruits. He could talk to those recruits and could talk their language and communicate with them. And back then, when you didn't have all the the NIL money is going to make the decision. These kids are jumping in the portal not because they don't like the school. I think they're jumping in because they just want to see how much money they can make. There's no question. And you mentioned who's making the decisions. It's a lot of these places are kind of setting it up like an NFL situation, but it's not the same. And looking at some of the other hires he's made, I mean, you've got director of advanced scouting, director of logistics, operations coordinator, advanced scouting coordinator, receivers assistant, OL assistant, special team assistant, outside, on and on. And, I remember when I was at Southern Miss, and John Miller, who was the GM at Auburn, he was there with Freeze. But I remember walking in there one day and talking to John, and I said, how many people work in here? And he said, I think it was 70 something. And I said, John, I said, it was you and me and your GA and my student assistant, and that's it. So, so we did the same thing. And I know it's a different animal, but I mean, it seems like to me that it's a little bit overloaded. I mean, a lot of
and it's diluted too. I'm not sure. Somebody's got to make the final calls, or somebody has to say, no, I like this guy no matter what. I guess the head coach has got to be that guy. And the GM that he trusts. I think Golish brought in his GM, right? Brought in his own guy that had been working with him.
He did, but I just remember when I was and everybody does it different. But when at LSU, when I was with Saban, we had, and I've still got the sheet. You had your measurables on the front,
Right.
and so he didn't want to take a corner that was under 6 foot. Like, yeah, that was it was a no-go almost always, unless he was just a freak. And so you had your measurables and you put that down. And then on the back, it was, okay, does this guy have any mental health issues? Does he have any drug issues? Does he have any family issues? When is he going to be first team SEC? When's he going to be an All-American? On and on and on. And it was the recruiting coach, the position coach, the coordinator, and then Nick made the final call. And you had to go make your case. And if that guy couldn't play in 2 years, you need to go find a job.
Yeah. Well, and again, that's probably how it goes, Ron. I think you've got somebody that knows how much money you got in the budget, because there's not an unlimited amount anywhere. There is a finite number, and it may be real high for some places, and you may have the ability to lift it up a little bit and raise that ceiling on your NIL money. But there is it's not entirely like free agency in that you have so much you can do with it. People can go as far as the school wants them to go. And so, and this is the good plus about Auburn, and we probably ought to get into this too, is that you can see by Texas Tech and some other schools that you can flip a program pretty quick. Yeah. So you've got to mix high school with portal, because if you get too many high school, that's developmental, and you won't change that negative attitude, that negative feeling of we can't win. So you got to have enough portal, and maybe more than you would normally want early on at Auburn, to get that thing swinging the way you want to swing it, because I don't think anywhere in the SEC right now you want to go too long without winning pretty good, because that's what they're paying money for. They're paying big money, and they're paying money to players and to coaches to win now, to win big and win fast.
And I think the key now too is, portal has turned in a little bit like junior college used to be. If you take, it's one thing to go plug holes, but if you end up looking like, and Bill Snyder at Kansas State was probably the best. He would half the team was JUCO every year, and
every year.
But if you get too many of those guys, and like we've talked about before, it's almost like junior college is now the portal, but you end up looking like Florida State if you take too many of them.
Right, and I think I think Florida State was the great example about how you've got to use good judgment. It's not rocket science. But again, there's a method to the madness. There's a method to the madness that you've got to figure out the right percentage of portal and the leadership, where you're going to get the leadership, where you're going to get those kids that grew up loving orange and blue, like the Pat Nixes that I had and those guys that just grew up. And that was a school they loved from the time they were born, and you've got to have some of those guys there with you. And like I was mentioning earlier in the show, you take Texas Tech, which had maybe one of the best front sevens in the country, and they spent a ton of money to get them. But their two linebackers have both started over 40 games, and their quarterback started 35 games. And he's a good quarterback, not a great one, but he's a mature leader that is a veteran on their team. And so that's the system that's because that's another team besides Oregon that say, watch out for Texas Tech. If they get hot, they've got talent on the defense and offense if they get real hot. And I think Georgia falls into that category too, along with Alabama. No, not Alabama, but Texas. I mean, to me, Indiana, Ohio State, Georgia, Oregon, and Texas Tech are five that I'm gonna move them up just a little bit higher. I don't know, and it's gonna be so close that it could change, but I'm gonna move those five a little bit higher than the rest of the other seven.
The interesting thing about Texas Tech, and we'll go back to Georgia in a minute. I think they can win the whole thing just because mentally tough. But Texas Tech, the interesting thing to me is Texas Tech's always been, throw it around, get Kingsbury and Mike Leach, and now they're winning with defense. One of the coaches out there, I was talked to him last week, and I was like, and he's a defensive coach. I said, you guys are good now. He's like, we've got every resource that you can imagine. And they've started redoing contracts out there, and all those guys are getting long-term deals, and they're paying guys. I mean, they've got and now it matters. Before, I don't know how much time you spent at Texas Tech, but it's, I'd rather live.
I've been there. I used to go out there and visit with Mike Leach when they were throwing it around, and of course Mike Leach was at Valdosta when my dad and I were throwing it around before he got to Kentucky. The no-huddle offense was being run down at Florida State. But you're right. Texas Tech went out there, and it's probably a good lesson for everybody, is that when you'll spend your money, start with the defense. I mean, there are probably about five positions. You get your defense, because if you're playing great defense, you're going to have a chance to win every single football game. Just like Auburn, they didn't win them, but they had a chance to win almost every game, including Alabama, including Georgia. They had a chance. But I think other than that, you better have a quarterback. You better have a quarterback. You better have a couple of running backs, and a couple of wideouts, and a great quarterback. Now I'm one of those guys say, yeah, you need a great left tackle, and you do. But I've always felt like if I had five guys that could have quick feet and smart and played together, I could have a pretty good offensive line. Trick, because I had Trick and had guys that could really coach it. But it doesn't hurt to have that good left tackle. We had Wayne Gandy. He was a first-round draft pick at that left tackle, and we eventually moved Willie Anderson out while he was a guard, but we moved him out there to right tackle after a while. Those were both first-round draft picks when we were at Auburn. But I think you got to go a quarterback, couple of great. I don't think you can get by with one quarterback, one running back. But if you got one, that's one great one. That's a guy you want, like Lacey at Ole Miss. He's a good one. But you probably need two wideouts, so you can't match up pretty well. And then defensive end, great defensive end, and great corners. And then work from there. Great corners, great defensive ends, because they can change the field for you. They can make the play. They can make the offense. They can get to the quarterback quicker than he gets to have to throw the ball in practice, and you can mess up their timing. And a great corner can take a third of the field away. He can play one-on-one and let you slide your safeties over, and play the run if you got a great one. So anyway,
another thing that people. A lot of people miss is how important, and this is not necessarily on the field, but
right.
the strength coach, because he's around those kids as much or
all
more
the time,
all the time, and
all the time.
A great strength coach, he can let you know, okay, this guy's got a problem, this guy's screwing up. He handles your discipline a lot of times. You get a bad one, it shows up.
It's a great point. It's a great point, because he is the psychologist. He's the guy that lives with your players throughout the summer. When you're out there recruiting, when your coaches are on the road, he's there. He and his staff are with them all the time, and they probably come in and confide in that strength coach more than anybody else. But he's also and that's not just the toughness part, which is critical, toughness and strength, but it's also getting to know the players and knowing when something isn't right. And the strength coach is so vital, because that's a great point, because I think that's always a critical aspect of building your football team, when it starts with that strength coach and what he can do on that one. But anyway, have we left anything out on the football games this weekend? What's that?
I want to talk a little bit about Georgia. I don't think they were the best team in the country 6 weeks ago, whatever. But I mean, they may be now. I mean, they just find ways to win games. And say what you want about Kirby Smart, he's done a great job. And I know Auburn people don't like him and all that stuff, but I mean, give him credit. I mean, those guys come out and they believe they're going to win every game, whether they do or not. And most of the time they do. But those guys play hard.
And Auburn people don't like Nick Saban either. But Kirby Smart probably is more like Nick Saban in the way he has developed his football team. Like him or not, he does a great job of building his team toward the end of the season. Does a great job with field game time adjustments, halftime adjustments, playing the best football at the end. And he's not as good as a running team this year as he usually is. Not as good rushing the passer, but he's going to want to run the football and play defense. And maybe that's kind of why that defensive coordinator type mentality is kind of like Nick Saban, but he does a great job. And I'm like you, they have played much better toward the end. They've gotten to be better. Their quarterback's playing well. And they're another one of those five teams that I have at the top, that they can go out there and win. I think they'll probably get Ole Miss in that first game they play. And they've got to beat them in that repeat game, which I hate to have to win second games. But I think once you get to the championship level, I think I always say if you have to play a team twice, I'm always going to pick the second team that lost the first one if it was close. But I think the way Georgia is playing and the way they have improved and the way they get better toward the second half of a football game, they play in the second half of the season, the second half of football game. I think they have gotten to be one of the best teams in the country because of that.
And the
they
grind
let,
of the schedule, the grind of the schedule. I
uh,
mean, look, give Indiana credit. That guy's done an unbelievable job.
right.
They got the right guy, and all those things. I'm not, but the if you look at Indiana's schedule versus Georgia's schedule versus
Yeah.
Alabama's schedule versus Oklahoma, most SEC schools, it's not close. I mean, it's just it's not. And the funny thing to me, I was looking the other day, and we may have talked about this already. I think I sent it to you, but there was a thing that came out. It was Nielsen ratings, the most watched college football programs in the country this past year. 8 out of 10 were SEC schools. The other 2 were Ohio State and Michigan. and the only program on the list that had a losing record, much less 5 in a row, was Auburn. And everybody else, I mean, LSU was on there, but
I mean, but Ronnie, there's no. I don't think there's any debate. 5 teams in the 12 are SEC schools, top to bottom, the toughest conference in the league. Now, I'm given. I think Big Ten's got 2 that can play in the SEC, that can play with anybody, but that's 2, and Oregon would be the 3rd. But everybody else, we drop way off more. And I don't say it's ACC level, but it's ACC pretty bad right now. Other than Miami, everybody found a way to be bad in that league, and even Miami did for a while.
And the ACC's got to change their tiebreaker rule. I mean, if you've got it, and they changed it when we were at Florida. They had all this convoluted tiebreaker, and there was a 3-way tie, and we ended up finishing, but we tied for the East our last year. Well, it was the second year we were there. And we thought we were going to get to go to the championship game. Well, they changed the tiebreaker, and it went to the highest ranked team. Well, if it goes to the highest ranked team, then Miami is probably the ACC champion, or instead of Duke. And I just think that the ACC tiebreaker, that situation, that's bad for the conference.
Well, I think they're going to. I think they're going to. But obviously, we can't have a 12-team playoff that doesn't get the best 12 teams in the country. Now, and a given, no committee person even thought for a minute there would be 2 group of 5 teams in there. Nobody. But that's what happened. But I think what's happening, and I don't know if it's going to change this, and I just have to say it. I'm not sure with the way we're going with portal transfer, with playoffs, is that we don't divide the Division I up. Because you know what? We've got 2 different levels, and everybody knows it. We've got the group of 5 and we got the Power 4. And I don't know if it's 75 one way and 75 the other, or there's about 136 teams. But if we did that, and I'm not the first guy to say this, and I coached in that league too. I coached group of 5 and SEC. It would give them a chance to win the national championship too. In 1978, they did it to 1AA. They didn't have, there wasn't a 1AA. When we played at West Virginia, my dad became the head coach. Davidson, they were all in the Citadel. They were in the Division I. That's who was a part of the Southern Conference. But they made a decision that there were separations in the levels of program, and I think it's eventually going to go to that because I don't think people want to see. They want to see. If we're going to have a 12-team playoff, and it may go to 16, people want to see the best 16, the best 12 in the country. And it's hard to say Notre Dame and Tulane's is better than or James Madison is better than Notre Dame or some of these other teams. Not that I don't want them in there. I'm proud that they are in there.
Well, Notre Dame can complain all they want to. You look at the schedule. They
don't compare
in the conference. And I think the other thing that we talk about SEC versus Big Ten. Big Ten's got 20 teams, and you've got maybe 5. So you got Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, USC,
Indiana,
and now Indiana. But you've really got 5 historically premier programs.
Yeah.
In the SEC, you've got 9.
Yeah.
And
it's a little different.
It's a little different. I mean, Auburn's not going to be bad forever, and Florida's not going to be bad forever. And Tennessee's not going, I mean, they've bounced back. They've been pretty good the last couple of years. So, when you throw in Texas and Oklahoma, along with
Texas A&M,
and then Auburn,
LSU,
Florida, Georgia, Tennessee.
No, this is a part of the country. I mean, college football is king. I used to say it when people from the North didn't understand. I said, because my dad was at West Virginia, so I grew up, Pittsburgh Steelers were my team because they were an hour away. That was my NFL team. but it dawned on me that people from the West Coast to the Northeast, their greatest honor is to coach on Sundays.
Yeah.
In the Deep South, the greatest honor is to coach on Saturdays. That's what you live for. And he never had my dad never had a day that he thought about going to the NFL. I never had a day where I thought about going to the NFL because I was raised in the South, and there's nothing like the SEC and football being played in the Deep South, and so that's not going to change.
And I
turned down
a job with the Redskins, or the Commanders now, but the Redskins
Yeah.
To go to Florida and Coach Saban told me, he's like, go to the NFL, and I'm like, well, I don't care anything about working for Dan Snyder. I'd rather go work in Florida, because for me, that's the way I grew up. It mattered to me. My wife's from Philadelphia, and her family, they're all Eagles fans and all this stuff. And they look at some of the stuff that goes on down here, like that's college football.
It's a little crazier. It's a little crazier down here. That's for sure. But anyway, and I'll end with this because so I can finish up the show and we don't go too far past 5. And maybe Nick Saban said it again, but the NILs, the big schools up Michigan, and they have 20 billionaires on their graduates. We might have one. They got 20 or 30. They've got a lot more NIL possible money to play with at the Ohio States and the Michigans, who graduate 80,000 students a year, and if we aren't careful, that's the determining factor. Look how quickly Virginia got better. Look how quickly Vanderbilt got better. Look how quickly Texas Tech got better. Quarterbacks are going to places they would never go to before, and those kind of things that are going on. So anyway, it'll be the next chapter, I guess. But we still got good football starting tonight. We got some good football to watch, and you and I both have picked Oklahoma in a tight ball game. And tomorrow I've got Texas A&M. I'm picking Texas A&M, and I'm over Miami, and I'm taking Ole Miss and Oregon, all 4 of them, because last year all 4 home teams won. And the only thing I question is, can the 2 group of 5 schools, they've got to get beat by a good amount of points. But I think it'll hold on that one. But anyway, I do want. What's that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I was going to say, before we go, I think that's where you were going. Talk about our sponsor a little bit.
Yeah, Tom Haley. I want to thank Tom Haley and the Haley Family Development, Haley Family Scholarship Fund for Auburn. As many of y'all have heard week after week, Tom Haley, his family has been very involved with Auburn for years and years, and have been great supporters of the football program and of the institution, and has been personal friends of mine. And I want to thank them so much for making this show possible, and allowing me to come back and be a part of Auburn. I've enjoyed this immensely, and I'm excited about the future of Auburn. I'm excited about the moves that they're making. It's always a great thing when you have to make a decision to make a move, and once you do it, there's a positive attitude about things going that way. So good to see all that, and hopefully see y'all back next week. Try to get on Monday instead of Friday.
Yeah, we had some issues this week, and hopefully Joe.
I had to go to Florida to see my kids, and then I couldn't get on a good Wi-Fi line when I was visiting with my children down there. So anyway, we'll be back on schedule next week.
And our time's up. We thank you for yours. Click like and subscribe below. It helps us out and keeps us in your feed. See you next week.